85% of the world's billionaires are self-made. Achieving success is way, way harder than anyone thinks. If anyone tells you any different, life will humble you. So guys, today's going to be the first in a series of training sessions that we'll do, and I want to focus on one of the things I think that's often overlooked when it comes to calling, and by extension sales, calling being a function of sales. It's one of the reasons, in my view, that a lot of people fail to, let's call it, reach the top of the mountain when it comes to sales, is because people often don't have a big enough why. When I talk about why, it's like, why are you doing this? Sales is a profession that people typically go into because they've got ambitions about the kind of money that they want to make. And what you'll often find is, to get the money that you seek, it needs to come from a place of intrinsic direction. So wanting to sell for the sake of making money, you'll find will lead you to falling short because of the work that's required to become incredibly successful in sales. So wanting to make money really is ultimately symptom of a cause that you're going for. So the cause for all of us typically relates to family, it typically relates to lifestyle design, and they're things that I think that you should really think about, because most of us, when it comes to being successful, massively underestimate the work that's required to get there. It's achieving success is way, way harder than anyone thinks. And if anyone tells you any different, it's probably because they're young or inexperienced, or some combination of the two. And as you travel through this life, you realize that life will humble you with what you think versus the reality of what happens. And to get through that, you've got to have a big fucking why. Why am I doing this? Because that's going to be the thing that's going to drive you through all of the setbacks, all of the issues, all of the challenges. And that's something that I really encourage you to think about, and to align ultimately what's required with your why. I think, Lysander, you had a comment or a question, then I go to you, Susruta. So Lysander, what did you want to ask or say?
It was just a comment with regards to what you're saying. A mentor of mine once told me that in order to be successful, you need not to chase the money, but chase the information first, and then everything else will follow.
Yeah. No, I like that. It's the information that ultimately, which is how, often it's a subset of like, how do I get there? How do I achieve this? No, I couldn't agree more. Susruta.
Yeah, so I completely agree what you're saying, but along with that, I just wanted to put my opinion, since I've been in this sales journey for about more than 6 years. As much as you start loving selling, your work, the day-to-day work life will look like easy peasy, just like going to a Pizza Hut and having it, right? So making conversations, having network, build your network, and make it as a happy thing. Not like, oh my God, I have so many calls to do, I had to report. Do not get obligated with the had to do things, right? So you have to start enjoying selling. You have to start enjoying the conversations with the leaderships of whoever it is, whoever the prospects is, even though the person is obviously new to me every other day. Keeping it happy way, what makes sales easier for me, is what I understood and what I learned from sales. So yeah, that is what I just wanted to put a note on it. So yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, Deepak.
Oh, it's fine. Look, it's fine, and it's good. And I think that, look, it's a given that you have to enjoy the process, because a lot of the process involves different versions of hard work and difficult work. To achieve excellence, it's hard. And anyone who says that it's easy is hiding the pain they've been through, or they are probably misrepresenting their results if you investigate it. So look, the why, basically, guys, the why is really important. And part of the why is extrinsic. So extrinsic is things that are external to you, and intrinsic is your internal sense of drive. So extrinsic can be part because maybe you've got family, or you've got friends, or you've got pets, for example, in my case, and there's things that you want to do for everybody around you. And so these things are things that are really important. And I would really encourage you to think about, why am I doing this for? And it's not just a case of thinking about it, it's writing it down, it's building a vision board, It's having cues that surround you, that remind you of why you're working, when you're working, if it's outside of office hours, if it's working on the part of the role that you find challenging. You need to have visual cues to remind you. So the reason that the visual cues are important is because what often happens to us is that we have spikes of motivation, but motivation doesn't carry you. It doesn't carry you. Motivation is also a muscle which needs repetition, and people sometimes forget that. So when you think about the literal ecosystem, what you can see in front of you, exposure to people and to books and to all of it, it leads to all service and support this goal fundamentally. So I would really encourage you to think about your why and to understand that motivation is a muscle, and that much like push-ups, your mind is a muscle and it requires reps, and you need to feed that source. It's the whole reason that the personal or the self-improvement industry exists. Now, it can be, of course, addictive, and there's other challenges that come with it, but I just really want you to remember to think about your why, because then it's much easier to do the things that are asked of you. So that's the first thing I think that's really important when it comes to why. And I mentioned something before when I said extrinsic. Part of it's also got to be intrinsic. So what do I mean by that? I mean excellence for the sake of excellence, because that's part of your own value and your own character. Because how you carry yourself is ultimately how people will perceive you. And whether that's your children, whether that's your family, whether that's people around you, it's something that, I encourage you to really think about, because typically how you show up at work is often a representation of how you show up in life. Really, it is. And you're spending 8 hours doing something, less, more. Just be really good at it for the sake of just being really good at it, because it just is ideal to be really good at anything that you do. And when you combine the why that relates to your family, and you combine it with the why that relates to yourself, because it's going to be you who's going to walk through your life. You're going to always have a company of one forever. Me, myself, and I, my thoughts, my thinking, my insights, my mindset, my worries, my hopes, my dreams, my fears. So be the best that you can be to your future self by saying, you know what? My future self, Arian in 5 years, that Arian deserves a really nice place with a beach view in Cape Town, with an amazing vista, enough money to take out my girlfriend or fiance or whoever it might be at the time, to be able to afford my mum's medical bills. So how do I make sure that I reward future Arian? What do I need to do now that will get me those results tomorrow? So you also deserve it to do it for yourself. I think that people don't often think about that. Like, what are the things that I'm doing today that are getting me the results, or in absence of me getting the results, what are the things that I need to change to make sure that I take care of the person who's going to take care of everyone else? And the person who's going to take care of everyone else is future Lysander. It's future David. So you got to take care of yourself first of all, okay? And with that in mind, the mental aspect of being in sales, outside of the procedural side of it, when it comes to dialers that you use for outbound calls, for lists that are built, for closing frameworks, for how you attend a call, it's really that mental aspect of it that's incredibly important, because that underlays everything. That underlays how much time you take to figure out these things. It does take 1,000 hours, because you need to make 100 wrong steps to figure out what the right one is. That's what the right step looks like. And it all boils down to that sense of, okay, why? You've got family, you've got people that you want to do things for, but to do things for them, you've got to do things for yourself first of all. And if you're going to be selling, then goddamn, yeah, just work on the basis that if I do anything, I want to do it really, really well, and I want to give my best account of myself. And don't underestimate it. Doing that is really damn difficult. It's hard to show up. It's hard to be your best self when you put energy into stuff. And if you really reflect upon it, you'll know, did I really review that list? Did I really frame this call in the best way? Did I really build upon ultimately all of the lessons that I've been taught? Did I really pay attention when I was reading that book? Like, willpower is a limited resource, and intentionality is difficult. It's a limited resource, which is why that people often travel through their lives and their careers and claim to have 10 years of experience, but what's actually happened is that they spend 10 years doing the same thing they learned in the first year. So actually what they've got is 1 year's worth of experience repeated 10 times. You see that a lot. I've got 25 years or XYZ experience. And then I talk to them about closing frameworks, about strategies, about dialers, about tech. They're like, oh, that's not really my, I've got, and I think, okay, so you've stopped learning. I hear you. So actually you've probably got about 2 years experience repeated 23 times. I see the nods around the room. Yeah, nod your head if this is making sense. But you're smiling because you're thinking, okay, I know guys like that. Am I a guy like that? Right? You see it a lot. People will have 20 years of experience, but actually they've got 1 year's worth of experience repeated 20 times. And their rate of progress is less than inflation. They improve by 0.5% per year. And then they come and they say, oh, I've got 17 years of experience. And then you listen to these people and you're like, God damn, I've met people that are way younger than you or experienced than you. So this is what they call a growth mindset. And that's something you've got to give yourself. You've got to approach everything in the manner that, right, I'm here because I want to grow. We must all go through lives. You must travel through this life reinventing yourself every 3 to 6 months. And that actually relates to something that Lysander said. Information. You take information that you learn or you observe through others, and then you translate that, you synthesize that into a framework, and then you try and deploy that and observe the result. And that should be a lifelong process, because we more than ever live in a world where it's the case of you adapt or you die, because it's moving that quickly. And guys, to get all of that, it begins with that base thing. It's like, I meet people, and often within the first 10-15 minutes, I'm just going to be more successful than you. And do you know why I know? Because I can see that I want it more. It's like, oh, I want it more than you. So I'm going to do the boring work. I'm going to read the books. I'm going to bash my head trying to figure out a configuration. I'm going to intentionally practice. I'm going to study cold calling frameworks and sales frameworks. I'm going to try one thing in 15 different ways within one day. And I'm going to get his 10 years of experience in 10 months through putting in huge variations in my reps and building frameworks from different systems that I ultimately learn and try and assimilate to build my process. And that's how some people go through and achieve rapid competency in a really short period of time, because it's that intentionality, and doing that is hard. So typically what tends to happen with people's careers, and this is why it's hard, right, is that for most people, the last time they really had to get to a place where their brain hurts because you're trying to learn something is education. It's like the night before you do an exam and you're like, oh my God, I've got to learn this algebraic formula. Oh my God, I've got to learn these dates. Oh my God, I've got to learn this. That feeling is quite unpleasant for people. But that feeling is the feeling when you're trying to really learn new things. And most people stop doing that for the majority of their careers. So any learning that they undergo is kind of incremental. But to make massive leaps, you got to learn new bodies, new frameworks, and new systems. And to do that, you've got to be goddamn motivated. And you've got to build a framework to maintain motivation or to maintain discipline in those moments where motivation feels lacking. Because you're doing it for your wife, your husband, your son, your daughter, your cousin, your mum, but mostly you're doing it for future Aryan, for future David, for future Sashruta, for future Joy, for future Lysander. I owe it to the person who is waiting for me in a year from now to make sure that I do the things today to change my situation tomorrow. But most people don't want to fucking do that, because most people, remember we were just speaking, Aryan, everyone can talk the talk, but you kind of see immediately who walks the walk. Did you read the books? Did you do the study? Did you really put in the right work? Or did you do busy work? Did you watch 10 videos but watch it with your head in the clouds somewhere else, so you've just not really paid attention and learned any of the fundamentals from the literature that you claim to have read? And you observe it based upon the results, because then people start failing forward aggressively and they can start achieving transformative results quickly. And what happens is that most people just lie to themselves. They go through their entire career lying to themselves about the progress that they've made. And the reality is that the money that you earn is a truth teller. It's a function of the skill that you've acquired, because when you achieve undeniable skill, it tends to correlate with transformations in the amount of money that you make. And with sales, it's quite black and white, because in cold calling relates to the amount of appointments and the quality of the appointments and how many of them translate to sales. And if you're in closing, it's of course bills or dollars transacted. So what's great about sales in that respect, it's a bit of a truth teller, because that's really the ultimate measure that you should benchmark yourself against, to say, oh, know that I've reached the top of the first mountain when appointments start flying in and I just make things happen. Because that's what you need to be. You need to be the change maker in your own life. I am in control of my fortune. I am the captain of my ship. I can instill the change that's required. And if you want to be successful in sales, if you want to be successful in sales at Pearl Lemon, if you want to be successful in your life, you've got to kind of make that commitment to yourself. And the reality is, the truth is that no one's going to save you but yourself. Not me, not the money that I pay any of you guys. You're going to save yourself, and you will see by virtue of the results that you begin to generate. And that will come as a consequence of being highly, highly motivated, because you've got big whys. And the whys are often almost always about love and service in the end. The people that I love are the people that I want to serve. And I want to serve them through a better life, better dinners, better this, better that. So I think that that's really the biggest kind of lesson that I've got for you today, guys. I'll take now 5 minutes if anyone wants to ask any question, or if anyone's got any thoughts. Yeah, go ahead, Sasruta.
So while you are explaining the things that motivates to others, my journey has just flashed in front of my eyes. So during the initial tenure of transitioning from technical backdrop to sales, which is quite a hard transition that I can say, because sales is one of the biggest pain in the ass, I must say. It's literally pain in the ass. But as soon as you realize it is your bread and butter and it is your interest towards, and if you start building your own sales journey within you, you will start loving it. When you start loving it, you're gonna conquer it. I can quickly suggest one book, which is The Momentum Sales Model by Tim Castle. I used to read that book during my initial tenure, and it really helped me a lot for how to handle hardships and how to take good things not to head to heart. So that really helps a lot. And obviously in sales, people really don't buy products. They buy relief from the pain and the better version of the future. So if you make them feel understand and show a clear path to the better future, the sale feels natural, not forced, is what I feel. Yeah. So these little things and everything, I used to get down of the presentation. I used to cry a lot. I could not even give two sentences in front of the crowd while giving the presentations to the clients. And Tech Mahindra is one of the biggest MNCs in the world. And they used to have a 200 and 100 of people in front of me. And I go up the stage and start giving the presentation. Is oh my God, I cannot even explain the whole process of taking it into, I get down out of it, right? I used to cry. And so that is the reasons and lessons that you can get out from. And you can learn so much in sales once you start loving it and once you own it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those lessons will be clearly mentioned in that book. I definitely suggest you to read through that book. It is available free on the Amazon.
Amazing.
Yeah. So you can read it or you can listen to it. It will really help you. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you for that, Susruta. The Momentum Sales Model by Jim Castle. I'll have a look at it actually, and I'll add it to my list. So, no, brilliant. And I agree. I think loving the process is really important. And it's good to hear that your story of transition, by the way. Anyone else got any comments or questions?
Yeah, one of the things that I think is really relevant in terms of sales is sales first. We've got to admit that it's a really difficult job. It's one of the hardest jobs in the world. And for you to actually have that drive to keep going at it and be successful, you've got to have a very worthy why. And in order to keep that serviced continually, you've got to have motivation. And for me, I think the major challenge here as a salesperson is to always have your motivation, in sight. Now, I think there are two types of motivation that I've been able to see is the backward motivation and the forward motivation. The backward motivation for me, it's like something that's chasing you, something that you're coming from, something that you are avoiding. Because if you don't make money, you're going back to being broke, right? But then there is a point that you're able to actually pay your bills, pay some of your bills, but ambition sets in. You want more as a human. Human needs are insatiable. There's where the forward motivation comes. How big are your dreams? How lofty are they? And that's if you're able to answer those questions, it then refers back to your why. And then, I think your why then sources your motivation forward. So that's pretty much it for me. And I think that's a big takeaway from this meeting.
Amazing. No, thank you for that. That's really good, David. And I like that concept of backward and forward motivation, actually. I think I'll nick that. So thank you, mate. I like that. I like that framing. So it's good. I'm glad that you got something from it. Arian, and then we'll wrap in a minute.
I want to quickly ask, what would you say was your biggest whys as the years went on? Because I assume that the why would always change, right?
Yeah, so whys change over the years. That's definitely true. I think that there's a good point that why aren't static because they change according to your situation. So my whys have transitioned over the years. My why for a long time related to, so it's not transitioned majorly away from family. It was to begin with about my dad, because my dad, I come from a family of economic migrants. My dad worked 100 hours a week and he had aspirations within business, but the reality is he's been a truck driver all his life, driving at the Heathrow airport because he didn't have any qualifications. They came from India. And my dad was often not present at the dinner table because he was always working, basically. So we didn't have family dinners because then my mum would sometimes cook and then she would go to work because she would work through the night as well if my dad was home, and they kind of swap things around to make it work. So that was quite normal in our family. So a couple of things. I think that one, my father, I had a lot of gratitude. Boys tend to idolize their dad and model their dad without knowing, sometimes both good and bad. But the things that I took was kind of a bit of unfulfilled dreams, if you will. Not that he ever said anything about anything, but he'd come in the weekends or come with his newspaper, and I'd watch him looking through the newspaper and spend like a good hour just looking in the property section for properties, houses that he couldn't afford to buy. We lived in a shitty area, bro, like West Drayton anyway. It's not that, but it's all relative anyway. It doesn't matter, right? So seeing that, I think, and then so that was big. And then also modeling. It was very normal for my family to work 100 hours a week. And because there was no money, I had to start my first job while I was 12 years old, because my mum, I started getting, I think, £5 a week, which wasn't enough for a cinema ticket. And I was like, Mum, I want to go to cinema. She was like, well, you need to get a job because £5 what you'll get. And she was like, count yourself lucky because I'm the spoiled one in my siblings because I was the youngest. So my sisters always said, oh, he gets spoiled. He gets some pocket money. We didn't get nothing. My dad bought me my first car and it was a better car than I was always a spoiled kid. But my perception was, my God, I've got no fucking money. So then I got my first job when I was 12, and that was normal in my household. It was, yeah, just everyone gets a job. I had a paper round, I had a car. I remember because it was part of like my buy. By the time I was 23 years old, I'd had 25 different jobs. I worked flat packing in a factory. I worked putting together mobile phones with a bunch of Chinese guys that couldn't speak English. I worked doing the paper round. I worked in a market putting up like frames. I worked in construction. I worked in a mechanic's garage. I worked dishwashing. I worked in a bank. I worked in a cinema. There's other stuff, dude, that I forget. I did a lot of work before I even started on, but because I was like, right, I need money. So modeling is big, like, you know, and then as it's transitioned, now it's about my wife and the family that we want to have, but still about my dad. But I, you know, it's always kind of been family. Like, I always wanted to pay it back to my dad because my dad sacrificed his life. He didn't see it as a sacrifice. He saw it as an investment. He's like, yeah, I'm happy to do this because I'm doing it for my kids. So never complained. But then, yeah, intrinsically, I come from a background where what I thought was normal, apparently to other people, was like unusual. It's like, you don't get a job when you're 12. I was like, in my household, that's what you do. If you want to, everyone was out doing part-time jobs. I went to Warwick University, and it's like a red brick university, but basically it's quite common for people to go through their entire academic career not working because you focus on exams and it's important. Bro, I worked my entire university career because it was normal. It was like, yeah, you get a job. So you do your 20 hours a week to cover bills and to pay for yourself. And also I wanted a car. So my mum was like, cool, work. And then you still study and all of that stuff. So yeah, they've been kind of what I've been accustomed to growing up. And I do think that if you're poor or you struggle within business, it's a massive competitive advantage. 85% of the world's billionaires are self-made. They come from no money. Not that I'm a billionaire, but that's the mountain I want to get to. But it's all a competitive advantage. That's what the literature doesn't really popularize. I've got family who are much more privileged, and the challenge that my sisters have is that it's very difficult for them to instill work ethic in my nephews and nieces because they don't need to work. So why would you work? You know? So that's the kind of stuff. Yeah, like Aidan was saying, like, you know, paper round, 13th birthday. So yeah, they've been the things, mate. I think that's then, you know, because there's many people here who are used to working hard, then it's just a case of channeling that energy into the right stuff. But that's why you need the 1,000 hours, because you can spend 10 years doing the wrong stuff and think you're doing the right stuff. So the whole concept of it is like, you have to put in a ridiculous amount of hard work, because it can sometimes take years to find out what the right work is, or sometimes it can take years to understand the lesson. And sometimes the lessons are like ridiculously simple, and sometimes obviously they're complex.